Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 204 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review I'm going to be talking about a Philadelphia-based indie rock band that formed in 2005, but didn't really release anything major until 2012 with their debut, Get Disowned, but then eventually the band did sort of begin to become a little more well known once in 2014 they signed with Conor Oberst's Saddle Creek label. In the following year, released their seminal, critically acclaimed sophomore record, Painted Shut. And a few years later, here they are back with their third studio album, which I'm here to review that very album that was just released on April 6th, 2018. And the album is called Bark Your Head Off, Dog. And as you can see, I have this album on vinyl, and pretty happy to have this on vinyl, not just because it sounds great, but also because the album cover looks so much more like beautiful on the vinyl. I bought this at Ka-Chunk Records, one of my favorite local record stores that's in Annapolis, Maryland. That's what the very lovely artwork looks like. And this is LBJ 263, meaning this is Saddle Creek's 263rd release. And anyway, here's a really nice gatefold. It's got handwritten lyrics and liner notes and some really cool artwork of like a few birds and a golden sun almost. Anyway, here's side A, and then there's side B. And this is 9 songs. It clocks in at over 40 minutes, so not too short, not too long. Just a nice, digestible runtime for this album. And here's a little booklet that's like Saddle Creek's fall 2017 catalog with like all the albums they've released, along with, of course, new releases. So if you are ever interested in checking out any of those albums that are on that label, there you go. That's your reminder. So that's the vinyl packaging for Hopalong's new album, Bark Your Head Off, Dog. This album came out in April, but I didn't get to listen to it all the way until June of this year. In fact, I didn't even know that this album was already out until seeing the album on Paste Magazine's Top 20 Best Albums of the Year so far. So I decided to check it out, and I'm very glad that I did, because this is like easily one of my favorite underground and indie rock records of the year. It is sure, the album may not be as punchy, as in your face, or as muscular as their previous album, but by toning things down a little bit, the band does come out with, by far their most mature and ambitious collection of songs to date. I mean, there is some very high quality songwriting throughout this album, and also the song structures, I think, are pretty unique and cool for this album too, making it feel almost kind of cinematic, although not really conceptual or in any way. I mean, this sort of strength starts out right off the bat with the opening track, How Simple, which I was aware was like the first single released from this record back in January, where the song lyrically sort of makes some references to like Francis Quinlan, the lead singer's like family, as well as a relationship, not really romantic one, but kind of relationship with a friend that, seemed like it was kind of that, things were all sort of, were all sweet and stuff like that. But then sort of realizing that she was sort of in phases in her life where she wasn't necessarily being very loyal, or like kind of not being the most kind to that person. So she's sort of in a moment of kind of solitude, which you can hear from some very satisfying lines that she drops in the song, like the refrain of "Here I am at the reserve to drink." Excuse me. Excuse me. And saying like how simple his heart, and like, which could be her instincts as well. He sort of says that how simple it is kind of frightens her sometimes. And I love the very kind of catchy refrain towards the end of the track. Don't worry. I just can't help but sing along to it. It is just so catchy. And also, of course, production on the song sounds very top-notch. Pretty cool guitar solo towards the end by Joe Reinhardt, and also the song does close out with kind of a somber finish with like just the guitar and a violin, and of course the "Here I am at the reserve to drink" line that of course I already highlighted. And the song also has a pretty cool music video, which is kind of inspired by Charlie Brown a little bit, because of her being like the lead star and her bandmates kind of popping in and out throughout the song. And then of course her with they did a play on the whole Bam cereal thing from Charlie Brown by literally taking a box of Trick cereal and like wrapping it in brown paper and putting the Bam label on it, which I thought was pretty clever. The next track, "Somewhere Judge," takes kind of a different direction a little bit. I mean, it is definitely indie rock, but it's got a subtle funkiness to it that I like, which you can definitely hear in the very intricate bass and drums, as well as, some very kind of spacey, cool keyboards that come in towards the end as well. And there's even a brief vocoder cameo that pops up, which also takes the song in a pretty cool direction that I would have never expected. And lyrically, the song sort of goes into some of the themes going on this album. Like, there isn't really any like particular concept going on this album or anything like that, but I'll share with you some of the lyrics here. And also, this song has some very poetic curveballs in its lyrics that could only come from Frances Quinlan herself. Lines like, "Deaf, indiscriminate, drags off the newborn buck with the broken leg." Right, and this is sort of a song where this friend that this person that she's like talking about is like sort of investigating kind of the conversations that this person has been having without her. That's kind of her and not quite being as loyal as this person could be to her. And also I do and also some other great lines on the track are "Notification, 8 executions by drug to beat the expiration, a shelf life of reason. Is that what this was, Arkansas?" That's poeticism right there. Then following that is probably the one weak point on the record is the song "How You Got Your Limp," which, while I definitely do love a few of the lyrics on here and the kind of gorgeous string arrangements and some cute little harp on the track, but I would say I kind of count this as my least favorite on the record because it its short runtime kind of makes it seem a bit underwhelming, and also lyrically it's just, not really as strong. But the next track, the much better Not Able, definitely makes up for all of that. With this song being one of the most cinematic on the record, with just the right amount of corn and cheese going on. And this song does sort of make subtle references, of course, to the whole Cain and Abel sort of like murder story a little bit. And also her voice definitely does carry a lot of these lyrics really well, in my opinion. Her kind of intoxicated, sort of squeaky kind of soprano voice, which really works well, in my opinion. As she sings lines like, "Today, think of all the alien shots in the dark that at one time all at once coexisted." It sort of takes a look at the Cain and Abel story a little bit, but sort of asking questions like, what if the details there were suddenly shared? Tender moments Mensa siblings keep secret. So this song is kind of about sort of the hardships of being a sibling and whatnot. And also this song is the first song on the record to contain kind of the album's sort of main mantra of so strange to be shaped by such strange men, before it eventually one moment in the song that I think really stood out to me was the point where all of a sudden the instruments kind of fall apart and the violin is making all these strange squeaky noises and stuff like that, I should highlight the instrumentation on this song. Definitely very well put together instrumentation on here. Some gorgeous string arrangements on here, plucky mandolins on the track too, as well as some kind of urgent piano. Of course, I mentioned that kind of crazy part towards the end where the instruments almost kind of fall apart a little bit before it transitions into a really cool sort of hooky guitar rock coda at the end. And also in that part there is some kind of hilarious lyrics like the line of "Daddy giving the middle finger to a Kodak lens." And the chemistry between the rhythm and lead guitars on the song is just so unreal that I wish it didn't fade out. I wish maybe it stretched out maybe a bit longer. The next track, The Fox in Motion, kind of takes indie rock and gives it a little more of a disco type flair with its synthetic percussion as well as its effects of all its odd guitar effects, including some guitars that are obviously backwards in the recording. Excuse me. It sort of reminds me as if Built to Spill decided to do sort of a indie rock and disco sort of hybrid here with this track. This song sort of goes into sort of this trip that our narrator is going on to the beach and stuff like that. And the fox that's referred to throughout the song is kind of a metaphor for I think is kind of a metaphor for things that are things that they can see in the night and stuff like that, sort of sort of referring to people that don't necessarily want to be seen, who are just kind of outsiders, and they're kind of probably on their phones or something like that, which that reference comes in on the line of each of us on off on her own in the dark, scavenging, and me on my phone scavenging. So it may sound like a line referring to animals, but actually kind of society and the way kind of humans function these days. And also, the song is very catchy. The I can't explain it. How can I explain it? Having been seen, what would that mean? Definitely is like really strong when Frances gets into her like higher range here there with that line, which makes the which sort of turns the line into this like chant that kind of gets stuck in your head. Following that though is my favorite track on the record, one that suits me. I mean, first off, the structure of the song, perfection. Also, the lyrical content is definitely some of my favorite because it's like some of the most comprehensive on the record. Like there are some lyrics on here that like at first may seem like you can't quite figure out what it's trying to say or anything like that. But as you keep listening to it, you sort of find yourself kind of really being drawn in by the lyrical content, and this song is like a perfect example of that. Also I love the kind of, and also it definitely has one of the best written choruses on here. I mean, that second chorus towards the end is top notch, with Frances giving off a very passionate, some of her most confident vocal performances to date here on this track. Here, and also the shouted gang vocals by that part, I think are really cool in the line of, in an open field, man is guilty always. And also, like, production sounds really nice on here. The vocal melody, I think, is very masterfully written. Some nice organ playing on the track, too. And of course, it does close out with a pretty triumphant guitar coda from Joe Reinhardt, which does close out with the line that pretty much completes the song in the way that it was meant to be. And now the mother of them all, she is just about to fall. In the history of man, reality becomes softened. Good point, Frances. The next track, What the Writer Meant, is another one that sort of is a pretty important piece to the record. Not only does it contain the "so strange to be shaped by such strange men" line again, but also it does bring up some of them. It, like, on paper may sound kind of endearing, but if you dig pretty deep, there is some pretty dark, agonizing imagery going on in the song. I mean, some of its imagery, even in this track, is somewhat kind of violent, as they talk about. We saw him in one brutal gesture tear that rabbit open, and you turned to me. Isn't this supposed to be for children? So that is so there definitely is a good sense of kind of melancholy to this track too. But paired with some gorgeous instrumentation. I mean, the string arrangements, like they are for a good chunk of this album, are really like, they're not just add extra icing or try to, priss things up. They got plenty of nuance and character to them. And I like how they do sort of get out of their comfort zone with the arrangements here, but they don't go so campy that it like goes overboard. So like this band isn't doing things like bringing in a children's chorus or bringing in this big epic horn section. They're still sort of staying true to their roots and being who they really are. They are, and also the drums on the track have definitely some good intricacies and keys to them. Mark Quinlan definitely does show off his skills and his ambition as a drummer here on this record too. The next track, Look of Love, is the longest track on the album, over 6 minutes, and it does start out pretty lo-fi, where you kind of have to crank up the volume a little bit in order to hear the intro, but if you listen very carefully to it, you can still really hear the emotion in Frances Quinlan's performance, not just in her lyrical content, but in her presence vocally. I mean, she sounds very, like, kind of lonely in that moment. And she sort of, this song sort of goes into her childhood and how she had, you know, plenty of, like, that even when she was pretty young, she still had kind of dark and menacing thoughts and, of course, fears of stuff like spiders crawling all over her bed. And, like, it's definitely, once again, another pretty kind of dark song lyrically. It's interesting how dark this album kind of gets towards the end, thematically. So, thematically, and sort of finally coming in here with the mantra of, like, go on Romeo, bark your head off. And I definitely is very satisfying to hear her with a sense of apathy go, the present, I have no place in it. I still dream of being watched, but not by, well, I know your thoughts on the matter, we don't need to discuss it. Sort of revealing a self-awareness to her kind of self-deprecation here on this song. And there's even, like, kind of a little bit of a sexual encounter at one point in the song with the line of, around 3 a.m. you will come to your roommate's piss his sheets right through. Years from now you will build beautiful black flowers. And even that sounds very beautiful. And also I do love the kind of build-up of instrumentation, some very kind of, some very confident organ stylings on the track, some kind of weepy slide guitars throughout the song. It's one of the more straightforward tracks on the album musically, but it definitely is still pretty serving as kind of a highlight here on this album. And it is just very satisfying to hear the song end with this very beautiful outro of, like, kind of atmospheric vocal harmonies, and Frances Quinlan with a lot of like, just passion, just yelling in the background, "Bark your head up, dog." Oh, it's so incredible. The album closes with the song "Prior Things," and not one of my favorite tracks on the record, but still, like, I do really like the kind of frothy strings that kind of lead the song and make it sound kind of joyous and hooky, which I do really like. This is a song that also has some pretty smart lyrics, like the line of "Vacation means leave, means obliterate all prior things." Right, all prior things. And also definitely some, and once again, a very catchy vocal performance when she sings lines of, "So when you finally go, when you choose to go, I resume my little lower road, and nobody needs to know, will know that I ever meant to leave my little lower road." And sort of making a nice little kind of companion piece to Look of Love, because sort of learning to be okay with all these kind of things that are kind of surrounding her, that are part kind of alluring but also kind of scary. Like, since it opens with the line of, "Just a few minutes after taking them, I realized hundreds of buzzing flies were all over me." And also, the song does contain some pretty cool instrumentation. There's some Fender Rhodes that's used on the track. The mandolin pops up once again on this track too. And I love that part at the end where not only is Frances Quinlan letting out this kind of off-kilter shout of "my little lower road," which is yet another very cool moment on the record, but also the song sort of gets more and more distorted. The ending part of the song gets kind of more lo-fi and distorted as, like, the song goes on and eventually fades out into its final second, which is really cool. Sort of how it was like a mistake that didn't mean to be there, but yet it just really works and sounds kind of beautiful once the strings eventually fade out and almost become a sound similar to that of like electronics, almost. So overall, definitely really loving this album. As you can see, I don't really have a whole lot of complaints about this album. It definitely is a very strong record from front to back. And you know, if you like your indie rock with definitely plenty of very cinematic song structures and lush instrumentation and very well written, honest, poetic lyrics, I think you're gonna really like much of the material here on this album. So I'm definitely going with an 8 out of 10 for this new Hop Along album, Bark Your Head Off Dog. And I'll see you for episode 205.